The Canon R5 Mark II is officially out, and I've been lucky enough to capture some awesome bear photos and videos here in Kodiak, Alaska. In this video, we're going to discuss the best camera settings for a hybrid shooter like myself to seamlessly switch between photos and videos inside the Canon R5 Mark II. Hey everyone, in this video we're going to be setting up the Canon R5 Mark II for all the hybrid shooters out there. What that means is you can switch between photo and video mode without going through any menu system. But to do that, we have to set everything up first. And I just want to say something to address my last video. I am recording the video right now with the Canon R5 Mark I, and I'm using this battery. It is the LPN6H or something like the LP6NH. Anyway, the name isn't important. That battery is recording at 4K 24 frames per second right now. That battery is also capable of shooting 8K 30 and 4K 120 in the R5. But unfortunately, that battery, even inside the R5 Mark II, can't even shoot 1080p 24 frames per second. You're limited to 30 frames per second in any codec or any resolution. I think Canon led us all to believe that their new battery will be required for 8K 60 and pre-recording and whatever new features they added. I think it's completely unacceptable that old features like 24 frames per second are not available with their old batteries, even though this battery is plenty strong enough. Now that we have that out of the way, make sure you have your new battery in the camera so we can set up everything. I'm gonna show you what it's going to look like once it's all set up. I'm a wildlife photographer, so let's just say you're shooting wildlife and I'm taking photos right now, I'm in photo mode, right? If I just press the record button, I have it set up so it's going to do 4K 120 FPS. It's an absolutely amazing feature. You never have to hit any menu system to access amazing high quality slow motion videos. If I want to access 8K 60 RAW or 4K 30 or 4K 24, whatever regular video settings you want, all you're gonna have to do is just flip the photo switch into video. When it comes to autofocusing, the AF on button will be your spot focus. This is for needing to get a small spot in focus regardless of what is in your scene. The star button will be the animal eye detection, and then the next button next to that will be for, in the viewfinder, we now have access to eye control. Set up eye control, you need to go into the settings and set it up for your in particular eye first before you do anything. Now that we have the setup out of the way, let's go ahead and show you how to make that all possible. Ideally, it would be nice to set everything from left to right, but I think the most important thing is setting your function buttons on your camera. So we're gonna go over to this new menu here, and I don't know what they call it. I don't know what this is supposed to be, but it's the green menu, and we'll be selecting customize buttons for shooting. You're gonna wanna copy everything I have here. The shutter button is now gonna be metering only, and that's gonna allow you to use back button focusing. Then I'm gonna change the next thing, and AF on, this is gonna be my spot focusing, and this one's gonna be tricky. So you're gonna select this metering and AF start under the AF on button, and then you're gonna hit info. Once you click that, hit info, and you are gonna make sure that these two are selected, AF spot, and also whole subject tracking servo is off, and what you'll do is just make sure that is off. The star button is now going to be eye detection AF. That's what that icon looks like. The eye control button is now this AF point button, so that's what that icon looks like. And one of my favorite things that I like to do recently, I did it on the R5, is using this button here. This is called the depth of field button. When I'm using the viewfinder, when I'm recording videos on a tripod and whatnot, sometimes on a bright day, it's hard to see the screen. If you just tap that button, it's gonna make your LCD screen just a little bit brighter. This is what it's called, maximize screen brightness. And then we're gonna keep scrolling down, and that's all I have under the photo side. For video, I like to use the star button for servo pause, just in case I know something is not moving or I keep getting autofocus issues between some branches or whatnot. Once I'm on focus, I'll just hit the star button and know that it's gonna be locked in while I'm recording. Alrighty, so the next thing we're gonna do is set up the Custom function 3. This is just pressing record while in photo mode. Is going to give me 4K. Ooh, didn't mean to drop it like that. Is going to give me 4K 120 FPS. So to do this, we're going to go into video tab. I realized the Atomos Ninja didn't record this screen. Make sure you're selecting the manual video selection. And we're going to hit menu. First thing we're going to do is start from the red menu on the first tab. And we're going to enable high frame rate. This is going to be 4K 120 FPS right there. When you enable high frame rate, let me just show you something real quick. When you enable high frame rate, you won't get audio. But if you do want audio, you disable high frame rate and you can get it from this screen, 4K 120. But I do want audio, so I don't really care for the audio. I'm going to disable or enable high frame rate and we are good to go there. And then under the recording format, 10-bit RAW is what we want, 422. That's the second option we see. Okay, going to the next tab, we don't need anything there. Third tab, nothing we need here. The fourth tab, custom picture. Canon got rid of where it says C-Log settings and C-Log 1 and C-Log 3. It now says custom picture. And the functions are, you turn it on. Once you turn it on, you have these functions here. I think the best one is C-Log 2. It works absolutely seamless. I'm just going to leave it there. And I got some footage yesterday of some Kodiak bears in 8K 60 RAW with C-Log 2. It ended up absolutely amazing. So C-Log 2 is called C2 on the Canon R5 Mark II. Wow, that's a lot to say. We'll just leave them on auto white balance. If you want a certain white balance, you can always change that when you're shooting. I'm not going to use pre-recording right now. And I'm not going to change anything here. I'm not going to change anything here. I'm not going to change anything here. And I'm not going to change anything here. You could do high in... I live in Alaska and I don't really worry about the overheating, but power off temp you can do high just so it doesn't power off fast enough. And okay, next thing we're gonna do, enable movie servo. Autofocus area is going to be set up for whole area AF. And then on the next tab, animal is gonna be your subject to detect. If you shoot people or whatever, you can change that to whatever you think is best. Eye detection is gonna be auto. And that way it's going to know to track the animal eye if it can find it. It's going to track the animal if it can find it. Or if it can't find it, it's just going to track something and probably go back and forth. But those are the settings there. And I'm not going to touch anything else on that tab. And that's all I'm using for that. So how do we assign this to custom function 3, aka the record button, while you're in photo mode? You're going to go over to the yellow tab. And you're going to click on the, let's see which tab, the fifth tab and custom shooting mode. You're going to click that. You're going to hit register settings, custom shooting mode 3, hit OK. And make sure auto update set is enabled. This means when you're recording, whatever settings you use last are what is going to be what you use next. The Atomos Ninja isn't letting me record my settings for some reason, but for the Canon R5 Mark II with 120 frames per second, you want your shutter speed to always be at 250th, and you can set your aperture and ISO to whatever. I just go with the lowest aperture possible and the ISO on auto. That typically works really good for me and my needs. And what that does is it gives me the option to always just have the lowest aperture ready for wildlife. If you're using like an f2.8 lens and then you put on this, which goes up to 7.1, it's automatically going to go to 7.1. And then if you zoom out, it might stay at 7.1. So you just want to check that once in a while, make sure those settings are still there. Okay, custom mode 3 setup. Next up is just regular 8K 60 RAW. How we're gonna do that? We're still in video mode. We're just gonna hit menu again, and we're gonna go to the first tab and basically do all that over again. And this time we set up 8K. So we'll disable the high frame rate. To get 8K 60, you need to make sure raw light is enabled. 60 frames per second, and then you can get 8K 60. And if you don't want to use 8K, SRAW will get the job done at 4K 60 frames per second, but you're still getting that awesome RAW format, which gives you so much more editing capabilities. If you're into editing as much color as you can, it's basically like editing a photo with the amount of custom control you can do. If you don't want to shoot RAW, you can take this and make this whatever you want. So basically, when I set up my friend Jennifer's camera, we'll probably do 4K 60. So what we'll do is main recording format. We'll do 10-bit. This is how Jennifer's camera is going to be set up. 4K U and 60, and that's all we're going to need to do there. When you are in 4K 60, your shutter speed is going to be 1/125th of a second. If you're in 8K 60, same thing. So basically just remember 60 frames per second equals 1/125th shutter. 120 frames per second equals 1/250th shutter. It's the most important thing when it comes to recording video. Okay, now everything's set up. Let me show you my full camera settings for photos. So in here, we're gonna just click the menu and we'll start from the first tab. Now, I have RAW photo set. Some people like C-RAW if they don't want as big of files, but I'm just gonna do regular RAW, and I don't want a second JPEG copy, just regular RAW is good for me. On the next tab, we're gonna leave everything like this. On the next tab, we're gonna leave it the same. On the next tab, I like to keep white balance on auto and leave everything else the same. Can't do anything there. Drive mode for wildlife, I definitely like high plus. What that does is it gives you 30 frames per second on the R5 Mark II. If you don't want 30 frames per second, if it's too much, well then you can change the frames per second by doing this. We're gonna scroll over to this menu here, this orange menu, continuous speed, and we're gonna hit it, and then you can select 20 or 30. So H plus is gonna be 30 frames per second for me and my camera, and that's good enough for me. Let's go back to the red tab. I enabled pre-continuous shooting. You don't need to do this. Just know if you shoot in 30 frames per second, you're gonna get 15 frames every time you take a photo when you click the shutter button. If you shoot in 20 frames per second, you're gonna get 10 extra frames every time you hit the shutter. Why is that? Because the pre-continuous shooting is only a half a second of shooting before you actually take the photo with the shutter button. Hopefully Canon allows you to make this more like 0.2 seconds or something, because 15 extra photos every time you hit the shutter button is going to be pretty excessive, and you're gonna need some big memory cards. Some people prefer fully silent photos. I actually don't. I like hearing a little bit of an audible click. And then another thing you wanna do is make sure release shutter without card is off. That will allow you to take a photo without a memory card in there, and you don't wanna shoot a whole day of photos and then realize you never had a memory card in. So without a memory card, it's not gonna let you take a photo, so at least you'll know that you don't have a memory card. This allows you to get a little more customability if you wanna customize some quick controls. I leave it as default. For blackout free display, if you shoot in silent shutter, I recommend leaving that on, so there's no blackout when you shoot. And once again, we are leaving this all the same. You can enable auto power off on the high temperature side of things. If you set up the function button on the first thing that we did in this video, you can just follow along here. AF area is gonna be on spot, and you don't have to worry about the lock or anything. Spot is always going to give you the spot focus, even if it detects the subject or not. This is what happens when I click eye focus. It thinks that this thing is an eye. But when I hit spot, it always goes to the spot. It's an excellent feature, and that is only going to work if you do what I told you to do in the beginning of the video in that customize buttons section. You can leave everything else as default. Subject to detect, animals, you can do whatever you want. Eye detection, this is like left or right. I don't worry about it. And then we have the camera set for eye detect when we press the star button. And then On the next page, I'm going to experiment with this over the next year and see how everything goes. I think auto is going to be your best case. Moving on, we're just basically going to leave everything else as default because I don't touch any of it. I never need to. Everything I have works. I don't really use the network settings at all. I don't really put anything onto my phone, so you don't want to ask me on how to set that up with your phone. Now on the yellow tab, there's a few interesting things here. I like to, one, make my file names R5.2. That way I know which camera it is when I go look at some previews on Lightroom or whatnot. Sure, you can look at the metadata too, but it's easier to look at the file name for me. And then if we go back, for movies, I don't know what I hit, to be honest with you. I just leave it like that. It's different now. Under auto rotate, this is a big one for me. I leave it on for computer only. So basically that means if you take a photo like this, vertical, when you go look at it on the screen, when you preview it on the LCD screen, it's gonna still show up vertical on how you took it. So you get a full screen image. If that is on auto rotate, it's going to be smaller on the LCD screen because it's going to be a vertical photo on a horizontal LCD screen. Okay, moving on, make sure your date and time is obviously correct and whatnot. I leave all of this stuff the same. I do change the screen viewfinder to auto switching because I use both obviously. And then moving on some more. You can do some power saving stuff. I had to change the screen dimmer to 30 seconds and the auto power off was like powering off like really quick. Well, I don't know what it was set to. 5 seconds, maybe 15 seconds. So that was too much. I liked 3 minutes a lot better. And moving on, we know the custom mode button. And then if you want to set up your eye control, this is where you do it on this green control tab on the 4th tab. And then if you're like me, I own a lens from Laowa. It is a 10mm lens that is all manual focus, and Canon R5 reads it as no lens on the camera even when it's connected. So if you ever buy a lens and you won't take photos, well, go over here to this screen and you're going to click on the last tab and you're going to do released shutter without lens and make sure that is on, and that way it lets you take photos if there's no lens on the body. But like I said, some lenses don't get recognized by the Canon series cameras. One thing I'd like to do if you're bored one day, if you want to add some stuff to the menu like I'll do right now, I'm going to select some items to register. And one thing I always like to have is a interval timer for time lapses, and we're just going to turn that on, hit OK. I turn the bulb timer on too. So what that means is when I click the menu and I go to my menu, interval timer is there, and that way I have quick access to time lapses without needing to search for it when the aurora is going off or something crazy like that. I know, like I said, this is a super long and boring video, but just focus on doing one step at a time. And if you got to rewatch it a couple times, I know that's something I always had to do when I first started out, especially when I got a new camera or something. I hope that this video kind of inspires you to maybe start shooting video if you're not much of a video shooter. There's just nothing better than taking photos of a bear and then pressing record, and now you got the slow motion set up. Before, on the old camera, R5, that I'm recording with there, I just pressed manual function to get my access to 4K or 8K video. Now that button is a dedicated video. Oops. Now there is a dedicated video switch on this camera. It's kind of nice because you get an extra button here to, you know, play with. Manual function button is now a full manual function button. But the issue is when you're using a longer lens and you want to switch to video, look at, I gotta take my hand off the lens to switch like that. So that's just the only downfall of this setup. There's no other way to get the video modes to work without switching from photo to video with that switch. I really appreciate you guys for watching. My next video is going to be a photo and video review of the R5 Mark II. Like I said yesterday, I shot some beautiful Kodiak bears on the river, and it was just a really nice hour or two that I had on the day that I got the camera. So it's always nice when you buy a new camera and something cool happens. Thanks for watching once again, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. If you haven't seen my rant video about the R5 battery, this battery, it's right here. Click it. it's getting so much hate for some reason. It's like, all I'm asking for is 24 frames per second and features that were on the R5 to work with this battery on the R5 Mark II. Anyway, I'm gonna be done now. I gotta go edit this video. Goodbye.